So last week was fellowship.
Jesus Christ.
This week is forgiveness of salvation.
Hello and welcome to A God We Could Believe In, a frank and honest look at Christianity as we find it today. We're going to be looking at the things the church says and does that are embarrassing, confusing, or even downright offensive. In other religious contexts, your questions might be forbidden, but not here. So whether you're a lifelong churchgoer with the scars to prove it, or you've never entered a church and are just interested in the debate, this is a safe space for you. In that spirit, we're diving headlong into questions of sex and relationships, covering topics from marriage and purity to sexuality and masturbation. We'll also be looking at issues of abuse, gender and identity, so listener discretion is advised. Please look after yourselves. Today we're answering your questions in response to our latest episode, Do Christians Just Need a Good Wank? Can sex toys and pornography help people to become confident, empowered and sexually aware? And should churches be encouraging congregations to use these in pursuit of their own sexual fulfilment? I'm Tim Woodson, and today I'm joined by biblical scholar Charlotte Naylor Davis, practical theologian Simon Hall, and poet, former social worker and daughter of Simon, Rachel Hall. Welcome everyone to our question and answer episode in response to Do Christians Just Need a Good Wank? How did we find it, guys? How did you find listening back to it?
I really liked it. I thought it was such a sweet and enjoyable conversation about something that I think when we first posed it, we thought it was going to be awkward. I found it really uplifting, partly again because I haven't heard lots of people talk in those ways about these things. Maybe it's the podcast I listen to, but also definitely in the sort of church conversations. I really enjoyed listening to it back. Normally I'm a bit like tense, but yeah.
I also thought it was great. And I was listening to it going, I would want to say that. And then I did say that. Or I was like, I'm definitely going to end up talking about normal people. And I did talk about normal people, but I forgot about my Mamma Mia book rack story. And
Yeah.
Charlotte texted the group chat and was like, oh, Rachel, I just love that butt crack story. And I was like, I said, what? What have I said on this podcast? And then I listened back and I was like, oh, it's fine. It's innocent. It's fine.
I think I've already admitted that in this podcast at a similar age that for me it was Barbara Windsor's bra coming off in Carry On Camping.
Great. I think we've had some really good couple of questions off the back of it, which I'm going to actually read these out in full because I think they're really good. So first, questioner says, I've noticed that sex toys are no longer seen with quite the same stigma, and it's come to my attention that they're not even age-restricted items. You can simply pick up a rabbit vibrator or a clitoral suction toy right next to the vitamins in Sainsbury's. My parents, this was the first time I've heard me use the phrase clitoral suction toy, probably the last, and quietly purchased them at the self-checkout. Reflecting on my own youth, I reckon if I had the opportunity to explore my body with sex toys sooner, I might have discovered what I enjoy sexually with my body without as much burden of shame. It would have given me more confidence to communicate my needs to a partner as I matured and maybe made me safer and a better communicator. So, what role might the church play in helping Christian parents be comfortable with their older teens exploring their bodies with sex toys without shame? There's a follow-up question. How could a youth worker in a church setting approach the topic of sex toys with young people aged around 16 or over with the support of the wider church? And what might this look like in churches where you've worked as they are now?
I mean, the first thing that comes to mind, partly for me, is I don't know how you write a safeguarding policy around that. And I don't mean that in a kind of really negative way, but I think this conversation followed on from our one about clergy sexual abuse, right? If we're going to talk about these things to young people, we need to be much better as churches at involving the whole church and knowing what's going on. So then, because I don't think as a youth worker you could have that conversation without parents knowing it was going to be something you talked about, without knowing that you've got the support of your oversight, all of those kind of things. I know I've got kind of like really serious and policy straight away, but because if you're not just the person kind of opening conversations about sex, but then you become the person that they're looking to as sort of knowing lots of things, again, how power works in that situation and how you keep everybody safe has got to be a consideration. We want to be more open talking about sex. Yeah, we do. Okay. Well, then we've got to be more responsible as well about how we do it. So that's my kind of knee-jerk, I think it would be great if those things could be part of a conversation, because I think young people do have those conversations and therefore they're having them. Church could be part of them, but let's think about how we take responsibility for that, which I'm hoping, as I was thinking it, that Rachel might be able to weigh in as someone who's, more in touch with these sorts of things and kind of young people and your social work background and stuff.
I'm not gonna lie, I don't know how relevant the social work background is because I don't think I had a conversation with a child about a sex toy.
No.
If I did, that would be surprising. When I was thinking about this question, kind of wrote some thoughts down initially of like everything's off the table, and obviously we have to consider safeguarding. But I was kind of thinking about it might be helpful to ask which young people would be interested in having more in-depth discussions about sex, and if their youth worker is the person that they would like to do that with. Ask them what they already know. Like, make it factual. What are their thoughts?
Yeah.
I don't think it's inherently a negative thing to talk about because what we've discussed is that pleasure and desire and, you know, all of these things are normal. They're not inherently bad or shameful things. But is a church youth group the right setting and the most appropriate setting for a young person to bring that? I don't know. I certainly wouldn't have felt comfortable in my youth group to ask those questions, but partly that's because my youth worker was like my friend's dad, you know, like that wasn't the right space for me to be like, oh, you know, like I had other friends, like, and I mentioned it in the last episode, I had other friends that were older than me at school, and like I remember one of them like talking to me about a butt plug, and I was like, what is that? Like, I had absolutely no frame of reference whatsoever, and like, bless her heart, she was like, what is this? And you use it for this? And like, she doesn't have a clue that she's like blowing my mind. And I didn't want to ask my friend's dad about that. So I think the first question I would ask is like, do you want to know more? And is your youth worker the person that you would like to ask?
Yeah. I think that's really interesting because I think it is definitely true that teenagers mature and are interested in different aspects of sex. Like, there is no scale for it, right? What some people are really wanting to talk about at 13, other people aren't interested in until they're 16, 17, 18, even later. Like, people's sexuality and interest develops in completely different time spans. So I like the idea of kind of, does our youth work, particularly in churches around sex and gender, go along asking the young people, and also maybe individually, what they want to know about, and is there anything that they want to know about, and then being connected into other resources, other people, places you can send them that are better equipped for this particular conversation or safer for the conversation, rather than, again, churches thinking they have to do everything.
Yeah. And I think I was imagining a scenario of like, you know, if there are people in that room that aren't ready for that conversation or don't want to have that conversation, then it's going to be a joke and it's going to be laughed at and it's going to be embarrassing. And the people that are taking it seriously are going to feel laughed at because other people aren't ready to have a conversation about certain things. So, yeah, I don't think it's a one size fits all for every young person.
It strikes me there's a lot of overlap in this question with the conversation that we had with your friend Lauren, Rachel.
Yeah.
Specifically on talking to young people about sex. Definitely go back and have a listen to that if you haven't already. Lauren's a sex educator, goes into schools, talks about sex. It's very much very much her day-to-day experience. So she's very used to this, and I'm sure she'd have a great answer to this. And I think all the stuff you said there is basically the kind of advice she was picking up from there, which is being led by the young person, I guess. I think the first part of the question about particularly focusing on parents and how to make parents more comfortable with talking about their old teens, again, that was stuff that Lauren touched on. But I think it starts off with this, you know, again, like Charlotte was saying, that the idea that this is good and normal stuff for young people to be doing. We've all talked at length through this project about the different ways that purity culture has harmed us in our experiences, and we want to be removing that as much as possible. And I think the idea of, like, particularly young women being able to reclaim their sexuality from a patriarchal culture. And I think sex toys sound, obviously I haven't used them because I don't have the requisite parts, but they sound like a great way to be doing that in a safe way that's like getting to understand your own sexuality before.
I don't want to get into the details of how I know this because this is not really in my area of expertise, but there is, I believe, a thing called a flashlight, which looks like a flashlight, but has a mouth or a vulva where the light bulb should be. So there is a sex toy for men, and
it's creepy as hell.
It's
okay.
I want to come back to the fleshlight in a minute, but I want to say firstly that I'm really appreciative of this question because my experience of re-listening to the episode, we recorded this several months ago, maybe even a year ago, and I was telling people this episode is not about wanking as much as it sounds, because it's really about people feeling disconnected from their bodies and then getting into a sexual relationship, in Christian circles, that's often in marriage, and not knowing themselves well enough to really have a healthy sexual relationship. And then I listen to it and I'm like, no, actually, this really is about wanking.
Yeah.
So the questioner frames the question in the context of understanding their own body in order to explain their own body to another person and share their self-knowledge in a relationship. And we've talked a lot about the role of self-exploration for women, but when we have a conversation about it for men, it's complicated by the fact that we think men are going to be the primary leaders in the market for things like sex robots. Well, we know that already there are sexual dolls that I'm definitely not an expert in that. And we feel slightly different about that because I think perhaps there's a feeling that this is for someone who is too anxious to engage in a real human relationship. So I appreciate the questioner kind of understanding our motivation in terms of talking about this stuff. We're not saying, oh, get yourself an amazing vibrator and you won't need people in your life anymore because this will bring you all the real pleasure that you need.
Yeah.
There are plenty of sex toys that queer youth might want to use to explore their bodies and their sexuality. And I think particularly if you are a young gay male, then there are sex toys that you may want to use in the same way that women do because you're less vulnerable to explore those parts of your body without putting yourself at the vulnerability of somebody else. So butt plugs and cock rings and things like that, which explain to you what your body likes in a way. And then, Fleshlight is slightly different and they are tending like...
Yeah, because in real time, I'm now interrogating my reaction to that, to Simon's suggestion of it, me saying... creepy, and then you questioning, is it? And that's really illustrative, I think, of how I feel about a lot of this stuff of like, I've got such an internalized like, no, that's bad.
Yeah.
About the male version of this thing because it's so like just the way that the industry has been set up to cater for a very cynical view of male sexuality that I reject. Yeah. I just find it really horrifying. And I did see an article the other week about sex toys, about like, and broadening it. And there is a company that do a kind of, it has more of the aesthetic qualities of upmarket vibrator. Yeah. It has less of the connotation of like, this is a sort of simulated woman and more of a thing in itself kind of thing. And I think that seemed to me felt like a more like, had less of that stigma attached to it. But yeah, interesting, because I think that this is the other thing is that we one of the things we've said from the start is we really want to try and avoid shame, and those things like my reaction there is something that might contribute that. So I'm like quietly slapping myself on the wrist for that.
But I think there are differences between the ways that different sex toys are marketed. I mean, that is that is true, and and if we won't probably get into it, but if we were having a conversation about things like sex dolls, I think my thing would be different because it would be about how we objectify people versus how we understand ourselves. And those are two sides of sexuality, but they're two very different things for me, like personally and ethically, like thinking about a person or a thing as something to be used versus this being a toy that is a part of a more holistic, healthy sexuality. And that's the problem with discussing lots of these things, isn't it? Because if they've been framed in a particular way for you, then it's hard to shift out of that and think, oh, maybe they're actually quite useful or healthy or ethical. And when we get onto our questions, we're going to get mired into this. The thing in itself is just a thing, but how we use it and how we approach it as people really does make a difference. Like whether, a fleshlight, they're particularly, if you go and look at them, like, they sort of, for me, they're like, oh dear, I don't know about that. But that's about my attitude to what I think someone's doing with it, which is a judgment I'm making. It's not,
To go back to the original question, I was literally talking to someone about this today. In a former life, I was involved in higher education, and there is a real philosophical question about what the point of education is when you can see everything on your phone. And I think the real purpose of education has to be discernment.
Right, yeah.
First of all, is this good information? Not morally good, but is this actually correct information? And then how do I discern whether this is information that is going to help me? These are the skills that I think all education needs to address. And I think Christian informal educators can have a role in that. So I don't know whether you'd be inviting Anne Summers to come to the youth group and display a selection of, possible sex toys, but you really do have a responsibility to help a young person think about what they consume, what they watch, what they buy. Not that I think you're moralizing, but I do think we've got a huge gap at the moment in that all of this is available to young people in a way that it certainly wasn't to me. Like, I mean, as a teenager, I was too scared to go to the chemist to buy condoms, and I was too scared to go to the newsagent to buy porn mags. I just didn't have access to the kind of accoutrement of sexual activity. In retrospect, I was having sex as a young teenager before I knew anything about my own body as well. But all of that is now available. And I feel like we have a really major responsibility as those of us that stand alongside young people to try to help them work through something that we never experienced when we were young people, which is it's right there. If you want to find out about sex toys, it's literally a few taps on your phone. But then that information, which comes with marketing, with profit motive, how do I judge whether this is good information or not?
Yeah, and I think that sort of sums up where I've kind of landed with a lot of these things, which is it's about it's like engaging with this stuff is it's morally grey, and there's very rarely is there a morally black or white, and so often these things come down to, are you engaging with it critically? I remember the kind of internet in the noughties where like it was inescapable. Before ad blockers, you'd be there like researching something for your homework or something, and there'd be an ad pop up there that was like just there, that was like trying to snare you in, and it was this cynically minded stuff. There wasn't a lot of like choice. It was like extremes straight away. And like I think it's helpful to be able to teach our young people how to navigate that world without saying this is like absolutely good, this is absolutely bad, but saying like, what is this teaching you? What have you learned from this about women, about men, about sex, about my position, my role in sex? What have I learned about this? And is that how I want to proceed in the world? And I think there's perhaps conversations that can happen there, but I guess it doesn't feel like something that necessarily you're going to extrapolate from the Bible, because the Bible, it wasn't built for this. No. We're honest.
No, I don't think we can take a straight line at all from biblical text to how do we deal with the idea of sex toys. What's funny about it for me is that, again, they just weren't even in my like worldview, right, as a teen. And even as an adult, like it took ages for my friends to be open about the fact that they had sex toys and that they used sex toys. And I think, again, that's really sad, like, because there's nothing shameful about this.
No.
Right? And that thing of clearing shame for me is becoming more and more important. Now, there are appropriate places to talk about it and inappropriate places to talk about it, because there are about everything. But shame shouldn't be a part of this kind of... There are lots of reasons, physical reasons, why your body might prefer a sex toy to a human. And you can do that with your partner. It doesn't mean that you're not being intimate. But again, when I think about like sex and disability is something we never talk about. There are plenty of people with different bodies. And there are lots of reasons why sex toys may be the way for you to be intimate with your partner and the best way to bond with your partner. right? And that is good. And again, that sort of shame that you should just be able to magically be intimate with another human person and it doesn't take work and it doesn't take vulnerability really because it'll just wonderfully happen is the thing we need to get away from, because there might be lots and lots of reasons that your body reacts differently to somebody else's. And everybody has a range of sexuality and you need to know about that. And I think, that's my main thing really, is like, can we remove this shame from the way we talk to young people about it? If you want a kind of slightly comic, but actually I think quite well done look at why it is good to talk to people about sex before they're married, you can watch various bits of Bridgerton. Because the different women in Bridgerton that have got married have all been taught in different ways about sex before they're married, but not properly. And it's become a big plot point in this latest series, is that this girl just has no idea what's happening. And her husband keeps talking to her about a thing called, what does he calls it something? The pinnacle. And she has he's like, did you achieve your pinnacle? And she's like, what is this? And she keeps asking people, and everyone keeps talking.
Friends.
Friends. And they talk in metaphors. And she's like, I don't understand your metaphors. Can someone please just tell me what this is? And it's this really like nice way of like, actually, maybe it's good to have a conversation. It made me laugh. I think I watched it just after I'd re-listened to this episode. It was like, everyone should be able to achieve a pinnacle if they want to. I will stand by that as a thing that I go on.
Right, if we have a policy as a podcast,
we have a policy.
That's it. Yeah.
I am like pinnacle positive. That's what I am.
Great. Wonderful. And with that, maybe we'll move on to the next question. Thanks, Charlotte. So, another really well worded question. I know you haven't covered pornography in an episode yet, but there was a comment in last week's chat about masturbation that suggesting the porn is inherently exploitative. While a lot of it is, and certainly it used to be, that's not the whole story anymore. I've had a bit of a love-hate relationship with porn, both before and after turning to my Christian faith. Honestly, the traditional stuff left me feeling a bit rubbish about myself, dissatisfying and quite demeaning, really. Lately, though, some sites are shifting things, with women at the helm creating porn content that's all about female pleasure, consent and safety. These platforms often see everyday people stepping forward to explore their desires on camera, but within a safe environment. My experience with this type of porn is miles away from the old school male gaze stuff. Seeing consensual, female-made porn focused on female pleasure has boosted my confidence. It's helped me learn how to communicate what I want and don't want when having sex with a partner, or what I want to explore on my own first to see if I like it before introducing something new with a partner. Watching others express themselves during sex without shame has encouraged me to explore my own preferences, especially when I can't chat about it with my Christian mates. In the right context, do you think porn could actually be empowering, a way to challenge the patriarchy? And what's the church supposed to make of this kind of content? Considering how easy it is to access porn nowadays, should the church be offering a different message to Christians about it, maybe distinguishing between the stuff that's exploitative versus the kind of porn that's consensual, female-made, and all about empowerment, communication, and consent?
I'm looking at Rachel.
My gut reaction when I read that question was yes. And to be fully transparent, I did not watch porn until last year. And that was a considerate decision that I made to not engage with something that I had assumed was inherently exploitative and patriarchal and not a way that I wanted to view sex or engage with sex. I wasn't bothered. But I also am a person who is bisexual, and there are elements of my sexuality that I can't explore with a male partner, and made an informative decision to engage and watch porn for the first time. And that felt empowering because I got to choose when I was ready to watch it, and I got to choose what I was looking at, and that was my choice. And there are things within porn that you can't see in mainstream media, and that's been really fulfilling. You know, I'm not fully exploring my sexuality with real women at this point in time, and that has felt really empowering for me to feel like I can access that part of my sexuality right now. And I think we can't know if the people in porn have all fully consented to making that content, but like in that question, there are pioneers in the industry that are trying to change that and are trying to make more female led content, which automatically in my gut I'm like, I trust you far more already, just because,
Yeah.
and you know,
Yeah.
maybe that's me being sexist. I don't know, but automatically I trust the women making this content more than randomers sticking whatever they want on Pornhub.
Yeah.
That is
yeah.
my thought.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
I really wanted to address that the thing about because I did make that comment that it was inherently exploitative. I think I regretted saying it, but I mean, I'm the one who edits this, and I left it in the edit anyway because I think I still feel a lot of conflict about it, and I thought it might generate a bit of discussion, which it has. So great, thank you. I really appreciate this question.
Yeah, me too.
And the chance to kind of to talk it out further. And I think what you were saying there, Rachel, like I think the thing that feels exploitative is because it's been so male dominated, so male focused, so hyper focused on male sexuality, and again, like as I've said before, in a very cynical way, and so it's very difficult for me to evaluate porn with like away from that lens. And I mean, the other game-changing thing is that, you know, OnlyFans and the kind of user-generated, you know, people doing it for themselves, solo creators, and you know, and people are doing that. You know, ethically, the reports are mixed on that. I mean, I think that one of the things to say is that when we're talking about it in the context of, you know, just trying to understand the sort of lay of the land, I mean, it's really common. The research on it is mixed in terms of like actual numbers, but it's something like 60 to 80% of men and something like 40 to 60% of women have engaged with porn. It's really normal to watch, and kind of like you were saying, like you know, even though it's a slightly toned down version, it's like, you know, we watch it in TV and film. It's in books, or you know, sex is depicted in those things, I think, and to varying degrees. So like we obviously like watching other people have sex, or thinking about other people having sex. That we obviously like, you know, as a species, we get something from that. So it's something to contend with.
I think to add to that as well, like part of watching porn that I found really informative was like, I need to believe in a love story to find sex on screen gratifying. And like sex for sex's sake is baseless to me most of the time. And I find it gratifying when there is evidence of like passion, connection, romance, whatever. And we joked last week about me being in a rom-com cult. But I'm like literally this week alone, I watched a TV show about two hockey players that are gay, and they're like arch. Did you watch
so
it?
Good.
Oh,
Heated rivalry.
My God.
Guys,
all week people have been like, "Why are you in such a good mood?" And I'm like, "It's gay hockey. It's the gay hockey show." I literally cannot get away. Today I bought merch for the gay hockey show
because you're gonna start watching hockey now,
guys. It's so good. But the thing, it was so nice for me to be
I
like,
watched it. I've seen it.
I invest in the relationship, and now I've realised that watching like hot men do hot stuff, love that. This is great. This is a new facet of my like sexuality. I didn't know.
Like lots of women do. That's what we learn, or everyone's learned from Heated Rivalry. Is that like women find that as attractive as anything. Partly because of the way it's written. Like you say, it's a very interesting and kind of equally written story, isn't it? So I think, and again, lots of women have reacted to it positively, and people were very like, "Oh, but it's two men. Is it the two men they like?" And you're like, "Yeah," and also there's a whole thing around it.
It's
but it is.
like,
I mean, it's incredibly sexy as a show.
Yeah, and the actors themselves have been like, we didn't expect straight women to respond to this, but it is that there is a feminine side to these men. These men are like, you know, being vulnerable. They are like expressing themselves. They're talking about their emotions. And for me, with that show as well, there is a level of like, those actors have been able to say what they're comfortable with. They have intimacy coordinators. They are allowed to say, I don't want to show this part of my body, but I don't mind showing that part of my body. Like, there's a lot more control there, and they're being paid to do this job, and they are like stimulating sex on screen, but they're not actually having sex. And the actors in the show have both got matching tattoos, and the matching tattoo is like sex cells is their matching tattoo. And it's an interesting idea of like them being like, we know that we're in a show that is sexy and people enjoy watching sex, as you said, Tim, and there's something about there's like maybe potentially something voyeuristic in all of us that wants to engage in looking at that and thinking about that and considering that. But the reason why this was all far more enjoyable for me is because the story was great.
Right. Yeah.
So I think there's something to be said about what people consider or would call ethical porn versus like, I guess what we might think of as exploitative porn. And it's a really, like, that's a really fudgy line for everybody. There's like things been written on it. I reached out to some people today to kind of find like definitions and things. So one of the things is that it's important that most people who are promoting that sort of thing are also talking and campaigning about the idea of sex work being work, and that people need to have the same sort of regulations you would have at your job to keep you safe. Because one of the problems with the porn industry is it is massively exploitative in general. It's known for that. You know, it's lots of things are underground. People find it hard to get out of it. So it's not just like any other job at the moment because it's not respected. Yeah. So how do you leave if you've been a porn actor? What do you put on your CV, right? Like, how are you doing that? So it can be exploited. You can be exploited. Even if you went into it really voluntarily and wanted to be that, you can then be easily exploited afterwards. So one of the things about kind of ethical or feminist porn makers tends to be things like pay and rights on set and safety negotiations, but also, and I thought this was quite interesting, my friend pointed out that some of the stuff that she watches, consent is negotiated on screen as part of the story.
Yeah, that's
which is something that we don't see in the kind of hardcore porn that I think most people are very afraid of. People are very afraid of what they've heard is in, and none of that is in there, right? So there's this narrative that women like violence, they like kind of being beaten up, blah, blah, blah. But in what's considered kind of more ethical porn, you'd have that negotiated. So what happens there is the person is centered as being a real person.
Yes.
Like you can't get away from the idea that these are real people who have autonomy, who are allowed to say yes, who are allowed to say no, which is very different from jumping straight into a fantasy and it being portrayed to teenagers particularly as though that's real life. Because as adults, we know that that's a fantasy sequence, but if it just turns up on your phone and you're 12, do you know that that's not real sex? So that's quite interesting. The female gaze is interesting as well. So that is things where the woman isn't just the object. She isn't just there to be used. So these are the things that make something, when people hear the word ethical porn, what do we mean? That's the sort of thing that people mean, right? I think that's important. And regulations for people. So then you come back to how we consume. And for me, there are like two aspects to porn. There's the production of porn and there's also the consumption of porn. And ethically, for me, these are two slightly different things. Right? I think they really are. Like, whether it's okay for me to watch people have sex is a very different question to, is it okay for someone to be making loads of money off my body when I have sex, and how that happens in the same way as it is with any consumption. I would say that I think this is the same ethics I have about like the jumpers that I buy. Is wearing a jumper wrong? No, but probably wearing one that was made by a child in China, yeah. So if we're going to be ethical people, then we have to have ethics around our consumption of something as much as we do about anything else. And that's different from, is porn right or wrong? Yes, no.
Yeah.
One of the things what I was talking about last week where I talked about normal people is the thing that was most impactful for me about watching that is that there was consent on screen. And like from discussions that I've had with other people, like the majority of porn goes straight in. There's like very little conversation, or like obviously in some things that you watch there can be like a storyline beforehand. But like if we're talking to young people about porn, or we're talking to young people about mainstream TV, like this show for example, or things that they can watch in the cinema or on TV where like sex occurs in those shows, the fact that it is far more considered now for there to be verbal consent on screen than 10-15 years ago is incredible. And that's the stuff that sticks out to me.
I've been really struck recently watching things like Heated Rivalry, and I can't remember something else I was watching that people kept asking, is this okay? Are you sure? Is this all right? And it just watching that for me was quite freeing in a kind of odd way of going like, I noticed it because I grew up with so little consent being talked about that it really sticks with me when someone constantly asks someone, are you sure? Are we all right? Is this okay? It's like, wow, this is incredible. And it is really important.
I just want to tell you about my friend Toby. Toby's not involved in the sex industry. He may even be listening to this podcast. He's an engineer. He's a geologist. And he was involved in a project to open an ethical coal mine. So this was a coal mine in South Yorkshire that was closed under the Thatcher privatization after the miners' strikes, and he developed a plan to reopen the mine as something that was owned by the local village, and the workers would own the mine. And it's not happened in the end. It got a long way. The Drax power station would probably have bought the coal and everything, and it was wonderful and it was beautiful, except that it was coal. And I kind of feel the same way about porn, that ethical porn is theoretically possible, but the actual industry is so dominated by stuff that I find morally abhorrent that it's almost an academic discussion. I'm the old guy here. I don't think watching other people have sex, consensual sex, paid sex, or whatever it is, good for me. I don't think my wife would want me to do that, and I don't think I would want her to do that. In terms of fantasizing about having sex with somebody else, I don't see how that would be good for us. The questioner, again, comes back to whether this is something that could help a relationship, help someone understand their own sexuality and their own needs. My own experience, which is somewhat minimal, is I don't think it does. I don't think it has helped me finding my stepdad's magazines or whatever as a teenager. I don't, because I think it created an expectation. I mean, this was, so we're talking about the early 80s and we're talking about the male gaze. I heard someone say that the majority of kind of mainstream porn involves expressions of violence, choking, slapping. And I don't understand that. And I don't want to live in a world in which either men or women are conditioned into thinking that that's normal. So I personally don't think that watching porn would help my sex life. This idea of mimesis, which the anthropologist René Girard taught on, this idea that we learn what we desire from copying other people. And I don't see how it would help me to learn what I desire from the desires of pornographers.
Yeah. I think there's a difference, isn't there, again, with like what's appropriate and what isn't. One of the problems that we do have massively with porn is its accessibility and the people getting hold of it for whom there's no context. They don't understand what they're seeing, and it becomes the thing that governs their narrative of sexuality. So we know that that's a problem, for particularly for teenagers. We've got the research on that, and that's to do with, in the same way that, and it's more extreme, but in the same way that we talked about earlier on in the series, that like all of the models of relationships I had were men being pursuers and women giving in, governed the narrative of the men that I grew up with. Gen X men think that's how you do this. And I've had to suffer from that. And I thought I had to just give in to people. We now have the accessibility of pornography without context for people. But that sort of pornography, so just on the basis of, say, what's in a scene, you're talking about something that's quite BDSM related. If you understand what BDSM is and you watch that, it's not a problem in the same way, I don't think, as a 12-year-old getting hold of it. Like, these are very different things. And again, that question of like, our questioner quite clearly has benefited and feels that they have benefited themselves from being able to see things and understand things that they didn't before. That's aside from whether the industry is exploitative. We need to distinguish between, do we think seeing any of this stuff is always bad, or is it bad for teenagers to see?
Yeah.
Like, because I'm not pro-porn particularly or anti-porn particularly, but I think those gradations do matter. Because I, as an adult, am allowed to ingest things that I understand without being upset about them. Learning about your own relationship, I guess you have to negotiate that in your relationship, don't you? And my assumption, Simon, is that you and your wife are quite good at talking about these things, or have got good at talking about these things over the years. So then, again, we're back to, this is part of this bigger conversation where we've just got to get better about talking about sex.
Yep.
So that you can say to your partner, something is missing for me. Can we investigate what it is? And then decide together in what way you investigate that. Do you need to be watching porn? You know, like Rachel said that she needs, like, this is something for her that she can't get. Or could it be found somewhere else? And are you both happy with that?
I also think, like, I really agree with what you said, Charlotte, about that there's a distinct difference between an adult who has a concept and understanding of what they're seeing, even if the conclusion that they come to is, I don't like that and I don't want to watch that. So I've never watched or like intentionally avoid anything porn media, like film, that intentionally shows violence against women. And I don't enjoy watching depictions of rape. Like, that is not something that I find enjoyable. And I can make a conscious decision as an adult to go, that's not something that I want to consume, because I understand what that means. And even if I did see something in porn, for example, or in a TV show, and I go, oh, I don't think I would like that, all that is doing is adding to my own knowledge and understanding of what my needs and wants are and what I would like or wouldn't like. And ultimately that, I feel, is going to benefit my individual sexual relationship with myself and my relationship with my partner. Because watching gay hockey, I can be like, I really liked when this happened, and I really liked that they said this. And, you know, like, we're talking about a fictional TV show, and already that sparked conversations with my partner. Like, at the weekend, my friends were talking about pegging. There's a whole group of women just being like, let's talk about pegging, because we've all watched this gay hockey show. And it's like, we wouldn't have had that conversation otherwise. And I hear your hesitation, Dan, around that's not something that you want to watch. It's not something that I want to watch either. And there needs to be a consideration that that kind of porn does exist. But as Charlotte said, there is also a community of people that engage in BDSM that do so in a way that is consensual and safe for the adults that want to make an informed decision to do that. But that's very different from, as you say, children and teenagers looking at those things.
Yeah.
I think what's going to be interesting, we have recorded future episodes, so I know where we're going in this conversation. And we're in this strange thing that I hope that we have people listening to this who are quite upset by this conversation. But the sad thing is that within some forms of Christianity, just the notion of consent has been open to discussion. Marital rape was still legal in my lifetime. But I feel like consent, I know that later on we're going to say that spoken consent is a very, very low bar. And we want to aim so much higher than that in terms of what we think good sex is.
Yeah. I think you're going to have an ethic, a sexual ethic, right? If you're going to have one, that includes what you consume as kind of visually. It's going to include what you think it's okay to read about, kind of as far as erotica goes. I particularly, anyway, want to think holistically about my ethics, right? So one of my things with porn is, one of my sexual ethics is that the person who I am doing anything with, or like we're talking about consumption, but it should be good and healthy for them as well. So for me, that rules out loads of porn, even if I wanted to watch it, because I can't be sure that this person wanted to be in it and it is good for them and it is healthy. I can't do that. And I feel that that's my responsibility ethically. And so that rules out a whole bunch of stuff, because that's where my ethic comes from. And I guess I would want us to think that way about these things. And one of the problems for me about pornography is that we talk about pornography as though it is a thing separate from the people who are in it.
Yeah.
And it isn't, right? Which is, again, why one of my friends that I talked to this afternoon said that she thinks OnlyFans has been a massive change in the sex work industry, because people can employ themselves and you can ask those questions of somebody. You can't ever do it perfectly because we don't know what pressures are on people to do things. But you can interact with a person, not through a company, not through Pornhub, not through, and that is different. And so you might want to consider what your ethic is if you were going to choose to do that and to consume that sort of media.
Yeah. I mean, if porn is here to stay, do you think the church should be producing its own porn?
Church-sanctioned sex work.
Yeah, the HTB Adult Entertainment Service. Every film starts with a prayer from Nicky Gumbel.
Can you imagine?
I was only going to say, I've done the marriage course, and there's a very, very, very unbelievably posh couple from HTB that do it. And I'm just imagining them like talking to the screen while there's another couple behind them, kind of, fulfilling their marital duties to each other. And them like, talking us through it in their really, really plummy accents. I think I would watch that, actually, but probably not for any healthy reason.
Sure.
In all seriousness, though, again, I think we probably need to admit that porn exists. as
exactly,
the church. And,
oh, yes.
And again, we know, and it happens all the time, like someone will be found out for something, and there have been church leaders, porn addiction, it is a thing. So there is something about the nature of porn, again, that for some people is unhealthy. Same as alcohol is unhealthy for some people, and it becomes an addiction, it becomes really destructive, it becomes awful in their lives. But you're not able to say it. Would much rather a church leader came out and said they were an alcoholic, right? Because we've got this idea that sexual sin is worse than other sin.
Yeah.
So we do need, in some ways, to be admitting that maybe everyone has thought they might like to look at some. And what do we do with that? And how do we do it ethically? And, let's start off from a better position than it's really bad, but if you have to do it these ways. Let's start from, hey, what's an average way of feeling about sex?
Yeah. I think, starting from a position of like you say, this stuff is out there. What's going to make you the most fulfilled human, and what's going to make you the best partner, or what's going to? That's the starting point, really. And I think if churches can't do that, then what are they doing?
Yeah,
and that does mean that they have to think about it.
Yeah, I think it's also okay to want to indulge your curiosity and to have questions about things, and to want to do that exploring and make your own decisions. And like part of the reasons why I haven't watched porn is because I those considerations of like, well, I know the actors in the TV shows that I enjoy have signed a contract, and intimacy coordination is a much bigger thing in the last 5 years. And I remember talking to my friends about it, and they thought it was really funny. They were like, what do you mean? Like, what do you mean you just watch things on mainstream TV? Like, as if that kind of does enough for me. And I'm like, that was what I said, like, because those people are being paid, there is a contract there, they have agents, there's there is so many safety considerations for those people. They have intimacy garments that they wear when they do this, and that is part of the structure of what they are creating. And I don't have the answers to those questions about porn. And my friends thought it was really funny, and I was like, no, I'm standing by this because I feel good about that decision. And I didn't need to go into detail about what I choose to watch in those moments, but it's interesting that I've changed my mind, because when we started this, and I said in one of the episodes that I've never watched porn, but it's interesting that I've made a decision to change my mind about that.
I have a thing about objectifying people that really bothers me, and how we objectify people in culture as well as in porn. So again, when I was talking to my friend this afternoon, I was like, I think I have this problem with like TV though as well. Like, one of the things about consuming particularly like visual images of sex, is about how we objectify bodies and whether we turn people into objects for our fulfillment rather than seeing them as human beings. And that is an issue. It's an issue that I think about a lot in terms of film criticism. Did lots of work on like 1950s femme fatales and how they turn up and what it is to be a voyeur. So I think, again, there's some really good questions to ask ourselves about, how am I using another person when I do this and when I consume this? But that isn't just a porn issue, that is a film issue. That, are you happy to watch films? I had a conversation recently with someone who said that they wouldn't watch a film with gay sex in it because they weren't interested in gay sex, but they also think that they watch films with men and women in, so it's okay to objectify those people, but not these people. Yeah. Or more, they feel more comfortable objectifying. So I think, again, there's questions, particularly again from a feminist perspective, I think about how we turn women into objects often and bodies into objects, and then we use them for our own needs. And so there's issues there for me. And I haven't sorted that out. This is literally like as I was talking this afternoon on the fly. But the things that I consume that aren't porn, that I find interesting and titillating, or I enjoy from a voyeur perspective, I'm doing the same thing. And I'm not even watching porn, but I am objectifying, and we've got child actors, that people have got countdown clocks on that when they turn 16 and that sort of disgusting stuff because we think it's okay to objectify people. So again, that's just a porn issue. That's a how we do sex in society issue.
No, I completely agree. Here's an objectification moment. In The Two Towers, Aragorn crashing open the doors in Rohan.
Oh,
Someone from Revive sent me a meme, and the filmer from Revive sent me a meme, and it just was, is there anything sluttier a man can do than throw open both doors of hell deep at once?
wholeheartedly
No.
agree. That is the best bit of the Lord of the Rings.
I want to bring in Aragorn as like when people
Finally.
say, "Oh,
Waiting for this.
you woke snowflakes, show me a real male role model who fulfills, okay, does cut off a lot of heads, but Aragorn to me is a good male role model." And the reason I'm raising him is because it's not just in film and porn that we objectify people.
No.
I think the very process of becoming infatuated with another person is you project your needs onto that person, and you don't want them to be a real person. You want them to be the person that meets your needs. And Aragorn says to Eowyn, "It is but a shadow and a thought that you love."
Yeah,
And
it does.
And so what we see on film and in pornography is just an extreme version of what we can do to real people and what can happen in a marriage. There is a very, very important moment in any developing relationship when you realize that this real person that you say that you love is not the thing that you wanted, is not exactly the person that meets your shopping list of requirements. And that's when you find out whether or not you really are willing to love them.
Yeah.
And they're no longer just your own personal wish fulfillment.
Yeah.
For me, in a sense, that not consuming pornography is a part of that, because for me, that would be trying to still live out my fantasy. I mean, I even maybe I'm a prude in this area, but I literally have to ethically work out, is it okay to fantasize about my wife being slightly different to who she really is? Because when she comes home from work, she's not in the mood.
Say that.
And sometimes I would like her to be. I think that's a really important thing. And I know that we're going to come back to that in a future episode about how do we treat the people around us. And sex is not purely about our pleasure and our fantasy.
And it certainly isn't the case that in conservative spaces where nobody watches any porn, women are treated really well. And married, the teaching that women are for the pleasure of men is not limited to pornography. In fact, pornography borrows it from a lot of our stuff. I've been thinking about this recently because I've been reading some stuff that the Bare Marriage Project are doing about a particular book, and so much of it is like the manosphere have borrowed from this teaching that is very derogatory to what women are for in society, and women become things that are to be used, and we serve you and you can use us, right? And so if that's turning up in pornography, it's not the case that if it's not through porn you're seeing it, that's the only place you can get that messaging. Again,
I also earlier, Dad, you used that phrase like marital duty, and
I know I was just trying to come up with a euphemism.
But that exists, right? That concept exists of you owe this to your husband, you owe this to your wife, and we talked a little bit in the last episode about selfishness and this concept of taking and giving, and that is a very real part of having sex with another person who has their own wants and needs and desires. And I hate that concept of I would be a bad wife if I said no, or I decided that midway through I wanted to stop, or just that concept of sex being a duty is awful.
Who wants that? What other person wants sex that's been forced out of someone?
Well, some people do.
Well, sorry, I regret asking that.
But I think that's interesting, and we're back to kind of negotiations of consent, because what some people really dislike about, say, the idea of BDSM stuff is if you're in the kink scene, consent is always the first thing that happens. It's this negotiation of consent, and you're like, well, actually, if someone can negotiate that with me and have that conversation, that's better than assumptions that are made about what I'm allowed to do to you. And, again, the knee-jerk reaction is to think that anything with any of that sort of stuff in it must be exploitative, but actually not as exploitative as some stuff that looks clean and tidy.
Thank you so much for listening. If you've enjoyed this episode, then make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts to make sure you don't miss an episode. Episodes are released every other Monday, and our next episode, entitled Two Genders and a Spectrum Walk into a Bar, is released on Monday 16th of March. Few issues within Christendom are more divisive than that of sexuality. Many mainstream global churches are facing existential collapse while they try and reconcile progressive and traditionalist voices. While the battle rages, we examine the cultural and biblical claims that make up the debate and explore whether the church can embrace an inclusive view of sexuality and gender. A reminder, if you'd like to support the project, please make sure you share it widely, and you can patronise us by subscribing to agodwecouldbelievin.substack.com. Here you'll also receive bonus episodes and regular reflections from Simon and the team right to your inbox. We'll see you again very soon.